Hey there, students. Thank you for being part of this presentation today. My name is Luis Silva, and our focus is World History, the Enlightenment, 1650 to 1800. Let's move on. What will we learn today? Today, we're going to identify the major ideas of the Enlightenment from the writings of Locke, Voltaire, and Rousseau, and their relationship to politics and society. From the year 1650 all the way to the year 1800, European philosophers began rethinking old ideas about government, religion, and economics, which led to an era known as the Enlightenment, and this is also called or known as the Age of Reason. The intellectuals of the Enlightenment were called philosophes, and they share some basic beliefs. Let's look at some of those beliefs. First, new truth could be discovered by using logic and reason. Second, everything could be explained by observing universal truth known as natural laws. Third, a belief in progress, that the world can be improved and that life should be enjoyed. And fourth, people are born with natural rights, personal freedoms that protect liberty. But why did the Enlightenment begin? Let's look at some of the reasons. First, during the Renaissance, people began to question medieval ideas, emphasize individual potential, which is also known as humanism, and also encourage education. Second, during the Age of Exploration, the discovery of new lands and trade routes led European nations to search for other new things. Third, during the Protestant Reformation, people began to question church teachings, freely explore new ideas, and tolerate other religions. And fourth, during the age of absolute monarchs, powerful kings spent lavishly, fought expensive wars, and rule without regard to their nations, people, and this brought a whole bunch of changes to the entire world, with Enlightenment thinkers beginning to express themselves and beginning to tell the world how things could become better for them. During the scientific revolution, scholars applied logic, perfected the scientific method, and made new discoveries that shatter old ideas. For example, the scientific revolution. Heliocentric theory challenged geocentric theory. Mathematics and observation support heliocentric theory. Scientific methods develops. Scientists make discoveries in many fields. A new way of thinking about the world develops based on observation and a willingness to question assumptions. Now let's look at the Enlightenment way of thinking. During the Enlightenment, people tried to apply the scientific approach to aspects of society. Political scientists propose new ideas about government. Philosophies advocate the use of reason to discover truth. And philosophies also address social issues through reason. Enlightenment writers challenge many of the accepted ideas about government as well as society. This gave Enlightenment philosophers a model to follow to make new theories about society. And here we look at the changing ideas. The right to govern. Old idea. A monarch's rule is justified by divine right. New idea. A government's power comes from the consent of the people. The most important Enlightenment ideas were those that challenged rule by absolute monarchs and presented new theories about government. Now let's look at some of the political ideas of the Enlightenment through the eyes of many of the Enlightenment thinkers. One of the first political thinkers of the Enlightenment was Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes was bothered by the English Civil War and chaos that plagued England after the beheading of King Charles I. Mr. Hobbes believed that humans are naturally cruel, selfish, and also hungry for power. Hobbes argued that people need to be protected from themselves. Now, what kind of government do you think Hobbes supported? based on the information that I just gave you. Mr. Hobbes supported rule by absolute monarchs. He used scientific reasoning to argue that only kings with absolute power could maintain order in society. He believed in an idea called the social contract. People give up power and rights to a king in order to get back law and order. Now let's look at another English philosophy, in this case John Locke, who disagreed with the ideas of Thomas Hobbes. He was influenced by the Glorious Revolution when the Bill of Rights was created to protect citizens' rights. Locke believed that people are born with natural rights, including life, liberty, property. Locke argued that kings could be overthrown if they violated people's rights. Now, based on the information that I gave you, what kind of government do you think Locke supported? Mr. Locke supported a limited or constitutional monarchy. He believed that government power came from the consent of the governed, or from the consent of the people. The people gave government the approval, and that kings should protect the rights of the people. And this is what the English Bill of Rights said in 1689. The king cannot tax or overturn Parliament's laws. It protected freedom of speech, and the army could not be used as a police force, and no excessive bail. This is basically the ideas that influence John Locke. Now, whose ideas are right? In this case, you have Mr. Hobbes and Mr. Locke. Hobbes said that people are naturally selfish and act out of self-interest. Mr. Locke said people are reasonable and able to make decisions. Mr. Hobbes said without government control, society would be chaotic. Mr. Locke said freedom and liberty are more important than order and safety. And Mr. Hobbes said that people are like children and need a strong father to keep them in line. And Mr. Locke said that people should be able to overthrow kings who abuse their power. Let's move on. In this case, we're looking at the French philosopher Voltaire, who was one of the most famous writers of the Enlightenment. Voltaire argued for the rights of freedom of speech and religion. He criticized intolerance, prejudice, and oppression. Voltaire was jailed twice in his lifetime in France for criticizing the government, but his letters to European monarchs helped introduce new reforms and freedoms. Now, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Voltaire once said, "I may disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." And this is one of the most important quotes from Voltaire. And it is up to you if you disagree or agree with this statement. But it's an interesting way of seeing the world. Let's move on. Continuing on with the ideas of the Enlightenment, Baron de Montesquieu agreed with John Locke that government should protect individual liberties and that too much power led to tyranny. Montesquieu believed in separation of powers. This means basically dividing the power of the government in three branches. As you can see here at the bottom left hand side, you have the legislative branch, which makes laws. We have the executive branch, which carries out the laws, and you have the judicial branch, which evaluate the law. Montesquieu's model of government also included a system of checks and balances in which each branch of government could limit the power of the other branches. As you can see here, this is an example of the United States, how everything is basically divided between, or power is basically shared between the three branches, in this case the Congress, the President, and also the court system. Another famous Enlightenment thinker or philosopher is Rousseau. Rousseau believed in individual freedom. He believed that people are naturally good, but power corrupts them. He also believed that free people form a social contract and government based on the common good. What kind of government do you think Rousseau supported? Also, Rousseau argued for a direct democracy that is guided by the general will of the majority of the citizens of a country. Now let's look at what Montesquieu said and what Rousseau said. Which form of government is better, separation of powers or direct democracy? Montesquieu said, take power from one king and divide it among three branches of government, so that each can limit each other's branches. Rousseau said, let the people make all decisions directly to ensure what the majority wants, the majority gets. And continuing on with political ideas of the Enlightenment, in this case we're looking at the Italian philosopher Beccaria, who criticized abuses in the justice system. Beccaria was very upset with the use of torture, corrupt judges, secret trials, and severe punishment for crimes. Beccaria argued that people accused of crimes should be given a fair and speedy trial, and that capital punishment and torture should be abolished. This is very important because his ideas were part or became part of the United States Constitution and of the constitutions of other countries around the world. Very important concepts. We have now come to the end of this presentation. Please make sure to subscribe, and I will see you during the next presentation.